Hi friends! This week we've been thinking about the Book of Esther in the Hebrew Bible. Esther's courage and Mordecai's wisdom saved the Jewish people from annihilation. Even though God's name is never mentioned, God is clearly working through his people to accomplish salvation. The fact that God is never mentioned in the book, and yet God is clearly present throughout, tells us that God is always faithfully working for good, justice, and redemption, even when we can't perceive him. When we recognize in the book of Esther that God was working even in the midst of drunken parties, selfish ambitions, and racial discrimination, we can begin to recognize that God is still at work, even in the real mess and moral ambiguity of our day. In the words of speaker and teacher Whitney Woolard, Esther pushes us to look at our own lives and consider how God might be actively working behind the scenes, even in the face of great threat or tragedy, to accomplish his good and perfect purposes. The message calls us to deeper levels of faith where we choose to believe that no matter how horrible things get, God is committed to redeeming his good world and overcoming evil. God is faithful to redeem the world and to overcome evil. Another way to say that is that God is faithful to implement justice, that is, to hold evil to account and to uphold good for all people and all creation. How does God implement justice? By the faithful response of God's people. The book of Esther celebrates justice, which comes not by the miraculous intervention of God, but by the daily obedience of ordinary people. Esther was an orphan who knew how to cook. She was beautiful and brave. Mordecai was a minority who seemed to sit around the king's gate a lot and was willing to speak up and speak out on behalf of others. They were just ordinary people who were willing to confront power and work for justice. Now, there will always be people like Haman who expect everyone to bow to their desires. And there will always be people who, like the king, concern themselves with their own pleasure and wealth at the expense of others. So it's up to us ordinary people to speak up and to speak out. It's up to us to use whatever gifts and abilities we have to influence power. It's up to us to recognize that we have more power than we usually like to admit, and to use our power, whether it's education or money or connections, for the good of all people and all creation. God is always working for justice and redemption, sometimes behind the scenes and sometimes front and center. But God is always working through people who respond to him in faith. Let's be those people. Thanks for listening. I'll see you again soon.